Coming up on this week's show, an affordable flash drive for your Sega Saturn.
Treat your C64 to a fancy new keyboard.
And we go inside the world of real-time software and Sega with Ian Oliver.
And the Retro Hour podcast is brought to you each and every Friday with our lovely friends at Bitmap Books. Now, one of my favourite books they've done you need to check out is The Art of the Box. Now, that takes you back to the days when that box art that we saw on the shelves in shops was the most important thing in advertising a game. And this features 26 biographies of some of the biggest artists in the industry and covers hundreds of games as well. At over 564 pages with more than 350 full-colour images, The Art of the Box is an incredible read. And if you want to get hold of it, we've got you £5 off if you use our exclusive discount code at checkout, RH5. And I'll put that in the show notes as well. Check it out and the rest of their RetroGaming collection at bitmapbooks.com. And with PCBWay. Now, of course, you know about PCBWay. They offer fully featured custom PCB prototyping, low-cost, fast turnaround quality boards, and they offer services like 3D printing and injection molding. And, of course, you know that PCBWay are huge supporters of the retro community. So get an instant quote right now at PCBWay.com. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 434, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And very nice to have you joining us for the podcast that every single Friday goes deep inside the world of old school video games, explores the industry, covers classic consoles, and of course brings you up to speed on new developments for classic systems, which is happening all the time, and welcomes a veteran of the industry onto the podcast in the second half to tell us their story. And we've got an amazing one for pretty much anyone who was into anything from the 8-bit systems right through until the Dreamcast, really, this week, Ravi.
Yeah, really interesting guest because it spans that whole time period. And throughout that whole time period, he was doing stuff to, really push the graphics. 3D Tank Duel on the ZX Spectrum was like a Battlezone style title as well. And, just being able to do those graphics on a Spectrum is pretty impressive.
Yeah, so today we're going to be joined by Ian Oliver, who founded a company when he's at university, actually, and I love the stories that we hear from Ian about this because he started a company basically out of the university dorm.
Yeah, he was getting students to, wrap the games up and feeding them pizza. It's really, really interesting.
And they were known back in the day for being pioneers of that. Originally, it was like, those wireframe 3D graphics, and then went into doing shaded polygons as well, and then worked with Rainbird and did some incredible titles on, systems like the ZX Spectrum and C64, getting into the ST and the Amiga. And then he founded a company called Cross Products that actually made development systems for consoles that got acquired by Sega. So the last kind of part of the interview, we get some really juicy stories about Sega pretty much from the 32X and the Saturn up until the end of the Dreamcast.
Yeah, and also kind of demaking or like downgrading games for other systems. So, taking Starglider to the ZX Spectrum as well, and the challenges that happen with that. But also, of course, with the Dreamcast, the GD-ROM as well, which was a very interesting format at the time.
Yeah, and hearing the story of the legendary Carrier Command, which anyone that played that game, I go through some of the scores that game got in the interview. It was all like, late 90% in the magazines. I think Amiga Power actually rated it one of the top 15 games of all time. But it turns out the development wasn't really something that Ian was all that keen to kind of revisit in his memories because it was pretty taxing. But obviously, I think the end result was definitely worth it. So a really interesting guest, Ian Oliver, founder of Real-Time Game Software. He's going to be our special guest in around half an hour from now. Now, I'm hoping that Joe's voice is all right this week. You've been to Download Festival. You're still washing mud out of parts of your body you didn't know you have?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm old now, so I did only go for the day.
Yeah,
which was the Saturday, so it was download, but it felt good, being back to my metal roots. I'm all about retro gaming these days, but it felt good going to a music festival and rocking out, as they say.
We're such nerds though, because I was out on Saturday. You sent me a picture, and I'm like, Crazy Taxi. I want to play it.
Yeah, I sent you. I was watching The Offspring.
Yep.
Who played on the Saturday, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I've got to send this to Dan straight away." And you were like, "Crazy Taxi, I want to play it." Like, yeah. I think they played it second. Played it pretty early on in the set, so yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, so your voice is sounding surprisingly on point, Joe. I thought you might be a little bit hoarse. Yeah, sounding all good. So we have got an amazing show for you this week, of course. First half of the podcast is when we have a little chat about what's been happening in retro from over the last week, and it has been another busy one this week, including, I thought this was quite cool because I was talking last week about my CD-ROM-based consoles, and we talked about the fact that, lasers can start to die around this age. I mean, you get to, a lot of the systems like I talked about my Amiga CD32, laser failed on that when it got to around the 30-year mark a year or two back. And it's starting to affect other systems as well. And if you want to be maybe a little bit precious about your original consoles, not have to swap out parts, I think it's always handy to have a flash cart on your machines. And I must admit, I've got them for most of my cartridge-based systems. But I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, maybe it's time to treat my Sega Saturn to its own flash cart, because this thing looks very cool.
Yeah, I remember modding a Sega Saturn, and I had the Pseudo cart in there as well. And
what was that?
It was a cart for, I think it was for playing backups as well, but it was done through the back, through the VCD port, I think.
Right.
Yeah, there's another one, Saturnator as well. I can't quite remember. I did have a Saturn and put one in, but it basically uses the cartridge slot on the Saturn, which was one that I'd always kind of assumed was for like Mega Drive games.
Yeah,
when I first got it, and
as we all did, it's backwards
and
compatible.
That also acts as a 4 meg or 1 meg accelerator card as well.
Yeah, but they were like 250 quid and like required modding, whereas this is the Saru, I think you say it.
This is a brand new flash cart for the Sega Saturn, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not 100% sure how it works, but it is a flash cart for the Sega Saturn that you put put an SD card in there. And as Ravi just said, like the other ones, the Saturnator, etc., it does work as the 4 megabyte kind of like RAM card as well. But it plays the games directly from the card, the cartridge slot, which just I don't really get how that works, because obviously usually the games play from a disc, and it doesn't require any modding or anything like that. And Time Extension here have actually said it's $60, so it's much more affordable, doesn't need any modding, and they've given it a 9 out of 10 and said, yeah, it works really, really well, but it's kind of blowing my mind. How does it work?
I remember when we started the podcast, there was that Dr. Abrasive video, and he'd actually managed to get it, loading through the FMV port, through the video port, and that was the way that he'd kind of hacked the Saturn, and it was a long time since that had happened. So yeah, I'm amazed that it's not going through that way, and it's just been done like a flash cart or a kind of one on another system. But it is really, really good because it also takes out the region lock as well. So you can play any games from any region, regardless of what the console's origin is.
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned the older devices, like we have got the Satiator that retails for $260, which uses the MPEG card slot on the back of the Sega Saturn. This new one, though, this is called, the Saru, retails for $60, so a hell of a lot cheaper. And as you mentioned, Joe, it goes into the cartridge slot on the top of the Sega Saturn. Now, you remember that was used for RAM expansion, which I imagine is how this works, because basically that port is directly wired into the system's RAM.
Yeah.
So I imagine it's literally just loading the games directly from the Saru straight into the system's RAM.
Okay.
Which would mean, it will be very quick, I imagine, from what I've seen. Apparently it's a lot quicker than loading it from the CD-ROM drive, for example. And it also can act as a RAM expansion cartridge, because that's pretty much the only thing I remember ever using that cartridge slot on the Saturn. I think there might have been an Action Replay.
Yeah.
That used it as well from memory. But the headline here is that now there is for $60, That is crazy cheap. I mean, looking at flash cards for like the Super Nintendo and stuff, they're generally at least double that price.
They're generally double that price. But I mean, like I say, you made it sound a lot more simple there. It's just running from the RAM. But I am so like, there's no disc. How's it working? Yeah. It's magic.
But also they're saying, there's a few problems as well. And that one of the main problems is using that cartridge slot. And I do remember when I had the Pseudo Saturn, I was trying to get it in the cartridge slot and trying to get it to recognize, and that was quite tough. And they say that the pins can kind of relax a bit and not really make contact with the cartridge, so you can't leave it in. And I'm not sure if you're going to be doing damage, putting the cartridge in and out, in and out, in and out.
I guess you just leave. I mean, I'm looking over at my Mega Drive. The flash cart's not been out of that for like 12 years. So if you put it in, I mean, generally you shove all your games on there, and if it's in there, then it's good.
Well, no, they're saying there's issues with the contact pins. So if you do leave it in, it can result in poor performance.
Okay, that's interesting. Because I leave the RAM one in my Saturn all the time, and that's got
I'm literally looking over at mine, and it's got the RAM card in it right now. Oh no, I think it's been in there for about 10 years.
Well, one good thing about this is it's open source as well, and they are saying it does have some compatibility issues with certain games right now, but apparently they put out a load of new firmware updates, pretty much every couple of weeks at the moment. So it is something the team are working on, and I imagine, barring any major technical limitations, that will probably be something that I wouldn't be surprised if it is fully compatible within the next, 6 to 12 months. The team are working on it, and it's open source, so pretty much anyone can contribute to this as well. But I think, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, for the sake of $60, I might actually get a hold of one of these, because I have mod in my Saturn, and I used a mod chip.
Oh, you went old school.
Yeah, well, I modded my Saturn. I think, so remember you got your Saturn, Ravi, about a decade ago, not long after me, and I think I tried to mod yours as well, but for some reason the chip wouldn't work in yours.
Yeah, and then I think that's why I got the Pseudo Saturn.
Yeah. Which involved, it wasn't too hard to fit, but it involved kind of tapping into the power supply for powering the chip, and the ribbon cable of the CD-ROM drive and stuff like that. So, having a solution like this, it doesn't require any modifications, region free as well, with the RAM expansion built in. I think I paid about 50 quid for the RAM expansion card alone at Play Expo one year or something. So for the sake of $60, I think, I'm confident that we'll improve this over time to make it more compatible. So I think if you are a Sega Saturn fan, and opens the door to a lot of new games, as we know, are becoming less and less affordable all the time on the Saturn. You better play all those Japanese games as well, which is a huge library.
Yeah.
So, are you keen on this, Joe?
I really like the look of it. I'm a huge fan of the Saturn, and I don't have any flash carts or anything like that. I've always been old school. You guys take the mick out of me.
You like seeing them on the shelf, don't you?
Seeing them on the shelf and everything, but I've got about maybe just under 100 Saturn games, and it's such an expensive console to buy for. Like, it's a real treat to buy a Saturn game. Even the sports games are becoming expensive. So I think there's a few games like Deep Fear, which is like a £500 plus game. If I want to play the English version of that, then this will be the way to go, really, realistically, for the sake of $60, 50 quid.
And homebrew as well, it opens up the door to
it opens up the homebrew, and like you say, Japanese games as well. The Japanese library is about 1,000 more, something mad like that, than what we got in PAL territories.
It's like, I had one for a while, but it's a console I'm not really familiar with. Like Dreamcast, I'm a lot more familiar with it and how it kind of works. But yeah, I do love the Saturn, and I think it's worth exploring a bit more.
I think we love it because we don't know a lot about it.
It's like
I didn't know anyone that had one back in the day. I didn't know anyone. But yeah, I do love my Saturn. Because again, it's that weird time. We talk about it in the interview with Ian, actually, that, it was a really strange time in the console industry. Sega were making this, it's always described as a 2D powerhouse. That's always the word that you hear, isn't it? The catchphrase. But then obviously it was kind of forced into 3D because of the way the market went. So I think, just kind of knowing that about the system and the limitations of it that the developers had to overcome, and the strange way that it was programmed, I do find it an interesting system. So if you have got a Saturn and you want an easy way to play and an affordable way to play the full library, hopefully soon, I'll link that up in the show notes as well. Now, if you're on a bit of a purchasing spree at the moment, you still got a Commodore 64, Ravi. Remember you had one of those for a while?
Yeah, I've still got it, and I left a joystick on it, and I burnt the side of the Commodore 64, so still got a little kind of stain on it. Yeah.
Right, okay. So how's your Commodore 64 keyboard last time you used that machine?
I need to hit it quite a bit, to get the keys to go. Yeah, it's old, and it could probably do with a clean, but also I think, they're a bit temperamental, aren't they?
Well, I mean, obviously the Commodore 64, the first machines are over 40 years old now. And I'm looking here in my office, actually. I've got one of the, the slimline Apple wired keyboards. I've gone through 2 of those in the last 6 months. Just keys have randomly failed on them.
What are you doing, Dan?
No idea. I've got a third one here today.
Heavy fingers.
Yeah, or spilling my coffee in them while we're doing the podcast, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, keyboards don't last forever. And the fact that a lot of the original Commodore 64 keyboards are probably not as good as they were 40 years ago. The fact that any of them are still running, I think, is testament to great design. But if you do want to treat your C64 to a rather flashy new keyboard, there is an Indiegogo campaign that's been running for just over a month now, and has absolutely smashed its target. It's already got over 1,000 backers. They've raised £97,000. And actually, this has been so popular, they've actually extended the deadline of this as well. So if you want to get in there, it is still running at the moment. And this is for a brand new keyboard for your Commodore 64 or your C64C. And it's got a really cool little trailer. Let me play you some audio from the Indiegogo trailer to this campaign.
Oh, the good old Commodore 64. Man, I've had this since the 80s. Let's see if I can remember how to do this. 10, print.
Yeah, that's what I was doing.
Quote. Let's see. HELLO. World.
That could have been a recording of Ravi's house a few months ago. But yes, I mean, everyone knows the frustration of having old keyboards, and, they are a part of the system, probably the part of the system that you use the most on retro computers. So this Indiegogo campaign is running right now, featuring a modern replacement, works with the C64, also the C64C, and it's basically made with modern parts. So you got, really high quality key switches in there. But the great
Cherry
thing
MX type key switches, the ones you get on your mechanical keyboards.
Yeah, the ones that annoy everyone else in your house.
Not the little
typing
springs that you have on the C64 one.
Yeah, I mean, these look gorgeous. And if you look at it as well, you go through the video, they've actually got RGB lights in them as well.
Yeah, so they've got a little microcontroller that's basically running these RGB lights, and you can run them in different modes. So you can have it like when you touch it, it kind of lights up, but also you can program it remotely and update it wirelessly as well, which is pretty mad. Saying that, this is probably more than the C64's worth. The keyboard, the most popular version seems to be £133, which is quite a lot. But, if you really want that blinging C64 keyboard, then, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, it does look very cool. And, the fact they've actually gone to, they've got them injection molded, the keys and everything that look like really good quality. And one of the stretch goals was, this thing where basically the Bling board is this modern keyboard replacement that we've been talking about. But also one of their stretch goals was for a device called the Bling box. So what they do is they basically put the Bling board into a kind of low profile keyboard that then works with a lot of other systems as well, including, it's got like USB-C out, so you can use it on like a PC and even stuff like the Amiga, for example, as well. So
well, they've also got keycaps, which is quite cool. So just a C64 keycap set for like 28 quid that you could put on a PC keyboard. So, you could get one of these like Amazon mechanical keyboards and then replace it and like do it up, So, it's got multiple options. I just love the love that's kind of been put into this.
Yeah, so if you want to get hold of one of those and bling up your Commodore 64, that is running on Indiegogo right now. I will link that in this week's show notes as well. Now, we're loving we're talking about this, the fact that so many kind of old school games and franchises are coming back. And we're talking last week about the second golden age of beat 'em up games. It really feels like it's on right now. And what about this for a combination of all things childhood combined? The Power Rangers are back with a wicked old school arcade beat 'em up.
Go, go, Power
I was
Rangers.
just waiting for someone to sing.
We weren't allowed Power Rangers because we'd always get too overexcited. And it would end in tears.
Beating each other up.
Yeah.
Stop morphing, Ravi.
No morphing time for rabbit. You know what? We were allowed Power Rangers. And my friend once kicked me in the face while we were playing Power Rangers.
Yeah. Justification.
And blood went absolutely everywhere, and it went all over my bedroom carpet. And my mum came upstairs and went ballistic because she just said no to said friend's mum to having a carpet cleaner come around, because she had a carpet cleaner come around and clean their carpets while the friends were at our house. And she said, "Do you want me to send him around to your house to do it?" And my mum said no, and then I spat blood everywhere because we were playing Power Rangers.
So to bring back the memories, Joe. There's a bit of trauma there, it sounds like.
Bit of trauma. Nah, it's all fun. All fun.
Well, you can
games.
get your friend round if you could beat him up virtually on this game.
Still know him.
There you go.
There we go.
I think it needs to be a rematch.
So I could beat him up virtually now. There's been many Power Rangers games over the years, but this is a new, as you say, beat 'em up, belt scroller, beat 'em up, which I am loving. We were talking about it last week. This is going to be Power Rangers Rita's Rewind that is coming out from Digital Eclipse the back end of this year. It just says, late 2024 at the moment. This looks stunning. This does. Digital Eclipse were behind the Cowabunga collection they did not too long ago, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection.
You can really see that in this as well, can't you?
You can really see that in this. Right down to the sprite work. I know it's Power Rangers, but the kind of the size of the sprites and everything, it does look very much like the Revenge of Shredder they did as well.
Yeah.
Looks just like that. But yeah, there's going to be a Power Rangers beat 'em up, which is going to be 5 players online based on the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers as well. I know there's been like 30 seasons of Power Rangers now.
When did it start? 92, 93?
93 it started. Famously based on Super Sentai. I know a lot about Power Rangers, actually.
I'm impressed.
Yeah. I was really interested in it as a kid, as, most kids of the 80s and 90s were. And then, I don't know why, I think a couple of years ago, I just ended up watching loads of videos on it. It just became like a real geek about it all. But yeah, really excited for this. This looks really, really good. Not only is it a belt-scrolling beat-em-up, but there's, from the trailer, there's levels which look very akin to Sunset Riders and Gunstar Heroes, kind of like side-along bits where you've got to shoot, run, and gun as well. And some very nice Mode 7-esque looking graphics. Where
it's very Super Nintendo, doesn't it?
Very, very Super Nintendo. Funny enough, the Power Rangers games that came out on the Super Nintendo were beat-em-ups, but only on one level, like a platformer. You couldn't move up and down as well, whereas in this is the belt-scrolling style. It is going to be coming out on all modern consoles, obviously, Steam, Xbox, Switch, PlayStation, etc. I will be playing this day one, no doubt. And the story goes, the bad guy of Power Rangers, I don't know if you remember, Ravi, Rita Repulsa.
I wasn't allowed it, honestly.
Oh, you weren't allowed it at all? I didn't know if you had some Power Rangers contraband. And
No. Fully
it's Power Rangers trauma for Ravi as well.
You'll have to come round there, Ravi, and we'll play it together, and I'll tell you all about Power Rangers. But
I just knew there was like a dinosaur bloke, and that was about it.
You're right. You're right.
I did watch it when it was on kids' TV, but I remember my brother being quite into it. I must have had him pay all that much attention, but I'll be definitely getting this game, so this looks awesome.
It looks awesome, but yeah, the original bad guy makes a return, Rita Repulsa, and the story is it's the Rita Repulsa of the future who sends herself back in time to the dawn of the Power Rangers and to assist her past self. So there's 2 Rita Repulsas working together to stop the Power Rangers from ever becoming or existing, if you will, in the past. So sounds interesting.
You know what though, Joe? Nobody cares about the story in these games.
No, this is true.
You just want to beat up people.
You just want to beat up putties. They're called the Putty Patrol, the bad guys. You just want to beat them up. But yeah, keep an eye out for this. End of the year by the looks of things. 5 players online, which looks awesome. With the original Power Rangers.
I was deprived of it as a child. I never had Sky TV, so you can see Power Rangers.
Very topical there, Ravi. But yeah, so I think this is awesome, and like I said, I'm loving this kind of beat 'em up revival recently. So yeah, this will be one that I'll definitely be picking up when it comes out. We'll keep an eye on that one coming out end of the year, so we'll keep you posted. Now, we are going to be talking about a rather interesting TV mod kit for a console that we haven't got that much experience with here in the West, but is one that interests me. And also a classic game that had a bit of a reforge, you could say. We'll talk more about that in just a second. Before we do, a little reminder that this show would not be possible without the support of our wonderful community that surrounds this podcast. And yeah, we talk about Patreon because it is really important to the show, because we do have it. You can think about it if you listen regularly. Think of it as a little tip jar, a couple of quid, couple of euros, couple of dollars a month, goes into the running cost of the show, really helps us out as well. And the good thing about our patrons community is just that. It's not just take. We do give a lot back, and we have got an amazing group of people in the Retro Hour community now, haven't we?
Oh, God, absolutely. We launched the Patreon because of the pandemic 4 years ago, which I hate to bring up because it's, thing of the past now.
We had a studio back then and we got booted out, didn't we?
We did.
Like, literally, the podcast is going to stop next week unless we can get help.
Exactly. And our lives have changed so much in those 4 years. We used to go to the studio every week, and it was where Dan used to work. And not to go into Dan's personal life, but he doesn't work there anymore. So the pandemic happened. We couldn't come in the studio anymore. And even if we could, Dan wouldn't be working there anymore anyway. Yeah. So the Patreon has literally kept the podcast alive. It allowed us to get home studios. We've all got nice little PCs now. I didn't even have a setup at home. No. When lockdown was first happening, the night before lockdown happened, Dan drove over to my house and dropped off a laptop and my mic. And I literally had to sit on my bedroom floor. We tried sitting on my kitchen floor, dining room table, just trying to get a good sound for a couple of weeks. We persevered, and we reached out to the patrons and just said, look, is it all right if we use your support to set up home studios? And here we are 4 years later, still doing it. And, the things that we set up to give back, we do the Retro Hour After Hours, which we thought, we'll do an episode each month for a couple of months, an extra bonus episode, a little bit about us, about our experiences, our favourite games and consoles and stuff. Here we are almost, 35, 40 episodes later.
43.
43. There we go. I lose count. 43 episodes we've done of the Retro Hour After Hours for our Patreons. And we still do our monthly hangout every month, which I thought would last 6 months before people got bored of talking to us. And here we are 4 years later. We still do it the last Sunday of every month. And we think we're going to do it on the first Sunday of next month, though, because we've got, obviously, Ravi's fantastic event Kickstart coming up.
I was just going to say, events are really a nice place to meet patrons. And we've got so many international ones as well. It's, we're going over to Sandefjord for Retro Messe in the 17th and 18th of August. And just meeting people over there that we meet every year from, the Scandinavian region and stuff. It's just so nice. And when we go out to Germany, and it's just fantastic that there's this big international community, and we're all kind of united over gaming.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, we couldn't do it without you, so we really appreciate any support that we can get. So if you'd like to join our wonderful community, you also get an extra 10 minutes of news in every week's podcast, because I chop all the adverts out as well. Some weeks you get it early. But really the main reason that you're doing it, again, like we said, is to just support the podcast and make sure that we can keep bringing it out for years to come. And of course, we'd like to welcome new members into the most prestigious high score table in the world of retro gaming, and that is the Retro Hour Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame!
And we have got some new members to induct into the Hall of Fame this week. A massive welcome to Simon,
Sloth,
and Disc B,
who all joined us on Patreon over the last week or two. We massively appreciate your support. And if you'd like to join, head to our website. All the details are at theretrohour.com. Now, I did mention we're going to be talking about a console that we haven't got much experience with. And, I was talking for myself then. You guys ever played a Wonder Swan?
I don't think I've ever seen one.
I have, interestingly.
Me underestimating you, Joe.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, the Wonder Swan, for those who don't know, was a Japanese-only handheld console made by Bandai Namco that came out in 1997. And there was two variants. There was a black and white version of it, the black and white screen, and then there was a Wonder Swan color as well that came out a little bit later. And interestingly, was actually worked on by Gunpei Yokoi. I can never say his name, Yokoi, who famously worked on the Game Boy, invented the Game Boy. He also worked on the Wonder Swan, sadly passed away before it came out. But the reason I've played one is my friend Richard randomly had one when we were teenagers.
Oh, wow. How?
I think he got it on eBay, like in the really early days of eBay. He had the black and white one and the colour one. And the games on it were very kind of like 8-bit, 16-bit kind of graphics. I played remakes of the early Final Fantasy games, like the Pixel ones, the NES ones and stuff on there. So I have.
What do you say? It's more like a SNES then, or a NES? What do you say?
It's kind of in between.
Right. Okay.
To be perfectly honest, I would probably say it's NES kind of graphics, but with nice colours. But the look of it is kind of like a cross between a Tamagotchi and a Game & Watch. That's the only way I can kind of describe it. They're brilliantly 90s. They're mostly like the clear plastic. In the 90s when everything was clear. I
had a phone in my bedroom that was clear back in the day. Yeah,
they were like that, but like with shades of blue and green and stuff, and shades of silver. You could get different coloured ones, and they had 2 D-pads, and then I think they had like a start, select, and an options button, and then maybe like an A and B button on the other side, and you could play them either way round, if I remember rightly. So you could play it, horizontally or vertically.
Shmups.
Very much like the Lynx. You could change which way around you were holding it because of the 2 D-pads were next to each other, so they could either be at the side, on the left-hand side, or at the bottom, depending how you could hold it. But obviously, this is the news section. I'm not telling you all about a Wonder Swan from almost 30 years ago.
As interesting as it is, Joe, I must admit. I've never played one of these before.
The reason we're talking about this is there is a Japanese shop called Kaiden no Kenchan in Akihabara in Japan, in Tokyo, and they are throughout June and July selling homemade mod kits so that you can play your Wonder Swan colour on TV. So you can dock it onto your television, onto your modern HD television, which has never been done before. So this is unofficial. It looks like they're making them themselves in shop, which is really interesting. They haven't said how they're making this, and it's based on an open source ROM called Swan Color HD. So I imagine maybe, I don't know, some sort of like, if it's based on like a ROM emulation.
Well, this is a mod. It's so I was watching a video about this before.
Okay.
And it seems like it's quite involved because initially I saw this and details are very scant about this. It's literally a tweet in Japanese with a picture. Yeah. And it shows a Wonder Swan game on a TV with a Super Nintendo controller draped over it, and that's literally all it is. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this Swan Color HD is a mod where basically people were using it to upgrade the displays in the original Wonder Swan consoles.
Right.
So it would allow you to swap it out for a nice, HD LCD screen.
Got you.
Like you often get these kits like, the McWill mod, that kind of thing for other systems. It was basically one of those. So people were using it to get a better screen in their Wonder Swan machines. But apparently it was quite tricky to fit these. It involves like fitting a custom PCB.
Right.
And you need to kind of put this between the Wonder Swan's video output and your new display. So apparently they reckon that this is, obviously you need to completely disassemble your console as well. You've got to remove a lot of the components in there. You have to do some soldering. So you also need maybe a console firmware update as well, if that wasn't already capable of it, which means, hooking it up to a computer and using software to flash the firmware of it too. So it does seem like it's something that's definitely not recommended for, people like us.
Yeah, it looks like it might be in like the early stages because this shop is quite innovative. I've seen that they've previously done like a handheld portable Famicom, which looks really nice actually, where you could actually plug the original carts into the top, and that was like in a whole kit form. So maybe they might have like a less destructive solution. They're just showing this as a proof of concept.
Initially. If it's based on that, I imagine if this is like a retailer that's doing it, I'd imagine you give them your Wonder Swan, they'll open it up, they'll do the mod for you, and by the looks of it, they'll put some kind of video output on there, whether it's HDMI, whatever, so you can plug it into your TV, which is how I imagine they'll do this. But I always like seeing handheld systems because it is interesting when you see them actually hooked up to a TV. I always find it interesting when I saw the Game Boy player.
Yeah.
That was kind of blew my mind. It's like, that's weird, it's cool. So I do like seeing that. And apparently, I was wondering kind of how, because you mentioned about that aspect ratio change. I wondered how you do that, but apparently you hold down like start on the Super Nintendo controller and that changes it into vertical mode. So that would work on the screen. So, it does look quite cool. I didn't realize quite how many they sold. 3.5 million Wonder Swans.
Yeah, it sold pretty well. It's just never got released elsewhere, interestingly. Yeah. But, like I say, as a teenager, my mate had them. It's so random.
So if we get this fitted, though, got to have a trip up to Tokyo, but, you know, she wouldn't mind that, Joe. You loved it there, didn't you?
I did love it there, and we're on about going again, actually.
Oh, there you go.
For my 40th.
And maybe Wonder Swans are much more available there and a bit less of a rare item.
Do you remember pricing, Joe? Did you see any of them when you were out there? Do you remember?
No, I can't remember seeing any, but I wasn't really on the hunt for them. But looking on eBay, if you want to buy one in the UK, about £100. If you want to get one
that's not too bad.
From Japan and get it, shipped over, you're looking at about £50 plus shipping. Not too bad.
Okay, cool. Well, if you've got one and you want it, hooked up to your TV, it looks like they're going to be doing that throughout June and July. I'll link that tweet up if you can read Japanese and you're in the area. Might be handy. Now, there's one final story before we hop into our chat with Ian Oliver. And this is something else I always like seeing as well, when someone takes a previously very popular game mechanic and, franchise that everybody loved and kind of turns it on its head and swaps it around a little bit, because someone's actually made Contra into a third-person shooter.
This is a Contra Reforged. This is very interesting. I say it's a mod of Contra. It looks like it's been built from the ground up, probably in some sort of Unreal Engine or something like that. But very reminiscent of a very early PS1 game graphically. But they've taken the graphics of Contra 1 and kind of rebuilt them into a 3D third-person shooter. It kind of reminds me of, you remember not Duke Nukem 3D, but like the one that came after?
Duke Theft Auto. Did you ever see that? Which was, the Grand Theft Auto above you, but in Duke Nukem 3D.
I never saw that, no, but it
really reminds me of Duke Theft Auto. Yeah.
Well, it reminded me of Duke Nukem anyway, the third
Time to Kill.
Time to Kill, that was it, yeah. And it's a recreation of the first level, and it looks really, really interesting. They've used all the sound effects and recreated the textures, etc. And you play as the blue Contra guy, I can't remember their names, running around from behind, and it's interesting because this looks really playable and it looks really fun. And Contra has never really had the quite the success on 3D platforms as it did on 2D platforms in the 80s and 90s. And obviously it uses all the original kind of music and sound effects.
Which is hilarious, actually, hearing the NES sound effects.
Yeah, hearing the NES sound effects. The only thing that annoys me a little bit about it is, and I understand why they've done this, they've made it auto-aim. So as long as
I don't mind that.
As long as the enemy is within the rather large circular crosshair of your gun, then your gun will lock onto that enemy. But when it locks on, it sounds like a microwave, like beeping at you. And it really takes me out of the game. But this is available to download for free. And, it's just the first level. It's about 10 minutes long. But yeah, I think they've done a better version of a 3D Contra than Konami ever did. I think it's been made by somebody called Retro Lead and available on itch right now. Just looks really fun, really daft, really easy as well with the auto lock on. There you go, Dan.
So you've got a CRT filter as well, which is quite nice to see. And obviously it is a Konami title, so they're not charging anything for this, obviously. It's only one level demo. Available for Linux and Windows. It does look like... Wouldn't it be great if they ported that to like the N64 or something?
Yeah, honestly. Awesome. It reminded me of early PS1 graphics.
Yeah.
Yeah, N64, anything like that. Evercade would be nice to see.
So if you want to get hold of that and have a little play, a bit of a giggle this weekend, I'll link that up. And of course, everything else we talk about, you don't have to Google around. I save you the job every week. Just check the notes on your podcast app or head to the website. You can click straight through from the article at theretrohour.com. All right, then before we chat to Ian Oliver, let's take a quick moment to give a massive thank you to one of our favourite sponsors who have really supported this podcast for many years now. And that is our wonderful friends at Shopify. You know Shopify, they're the ones that give us this sound.
Means you've made a sale.
They love that sound. Means money has landed in your account. And obviously it is that time of year now when, us guys are going to be going to lots of events and, we have got some books to sell at Ravi's event next weekend. You're always at your retro gaming markets too. If you do anything like that, it is worth checking out Shopify because they are the all-in-one e-commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. And they are revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. So if you sell anything at all, retro video games, t-shirts, books, craft fairs, I see these little card readers that Shopify do, these little point-of-sale systems. You need those these days because nobody carries cash anymore. And They also do all the stuff you need to get yourself selling online and across your social media marketplaces like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok as well, full of industry-leading tools ready to ignite your growth. Shopify will give you complete control over your business and your brand. And the best thing is, you don't have to learn any new skills. No design, no coding, anything like that needed. And they've got award-winning help with an extensive business course library when you need it. Shopify's there to support your success every step of the way. So if you sell anything at all, online or in person, it's time to get serious about selling and get Shopify today. So why don't you try out this exclusive offer that we've got for you, where you can check out Shopify for just £1 a month on a trial period. A no-brainer. Give it a go. You'll help out the podcast by using our link. Let them know that we sent you. Head to shopify.co.uk/retro hour. All lowercase, shopify.co.uk/retro hour. I'll put that in the show notes, and get ready to take your business to the next level today and hear a lot more of this. All right then, well, thank you so much for checking out the news this week. We'll have more for you next Friday. A little reminder, and I know we ask this a lot, but it is a really easy way that you can help us out, because we appreciate reviews, don't we, on podcast apps. And it's not just to massage our ego, although I will admit, when we do get a nice review, which is, thankfully most of them, Ravi always takes a little screenshot and sends them over. And whatever we're doing, Jeff, you're out at work and you just read that, puts a little spring in your step, doesn't it? A little smile on your face.
Absolutely.
Really hard at work, so we do appreciate those. But really, the main reason that we like getting 5-star reviews and nice comments is that it helps us out in that all-important podcast algorithm. So that means that pushes us up the podcast charts, gets us in front of new people as well. So, if you can't support the show on Patreon, we completely appreciate it. Everyone can. That's another way that you can really help us out. So we'd hugely appreciate that. Right, then next, going inside the world of real-time software and some amazing stories about Sega with our guest, Ian Oliver. You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and it is time to welcome on this week's very special guest. And if you're a regular listener, you know that we love going back to what we call the golden age of British microcomputing, systems like the ZX Spectrum and the Amstrad CPC and the Commodore 64. And our guest this week was actually the founder of a company called Real Time Game Software, who were a big pioneer in the early 3D space in particular. So I can't wait to hear more stories about that. Let's welcome on our guest, Ian Oliver. How's it going, Ian?
It's going very well, thank you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you taking a bit of time out your day to come on and do some reminiscing with us, and looking forward to hearing some stories about real-time game software. But there is a question that we always like to start our interviews with, just to find out where our guest got the bug from. Do you remember what initially got you interested in computers and video games, kind of where your interest all started?
Well, it was a kind of a journey, really. I was always far more interested in maths and science than anything else from the age of 3 or 4. I wanted to be a scientist. I didn't want to be an engine driver or a footballer like all of my mates. So, everything I wanted from parents for Christmas and birthdays was science-related, science books, microscopes, this kind of thing. And age 12 or 13, I got an electronic kit. I don't know why my parents decided to get me that, but it was a bit of a turning point, because I got seriously into electronics, playing around with that kit and taking bits out of old TVs, and started reading electronics magazines, which, as time went by, started covering these newfangled things called microprocessors. And I thought, well, these sound interesting. This is, electronics to another level, really. So I better get myself one of these things called a computer.
Well, they were really interesting, those little electronics kits, because they're quite detailed, and you'd learn about like capacitors and resistors and stuff like that. Did that kind of then lead to you getting a certain computer?
There wasn't an awful lot of choice of computers. I got an Ohio Scientific Superboard 2, which not many people know about. And I've sold many of my old computers over the years, but that one is still upstairs. And you're right, the electronics kits, they gave you a real, bottom-up understanding. So, I'm not one of these kind of programmers who thinks that the processor runs C directly or something like that. I understand it all the way down to the bottom level, the gates and the capacitors and resistors and things. So, not many people know that computer, but there was a clone of it called the UK 101 came out and sold very well. And that was a kit form one. And that was one of the first UK home computers that sold really well, and that was pre-Sinclair. I think I'm going to have to check some dates and see if it overlapped with the ZX80 and things like that. But yeah, I got the Ohio Scientific computer and never looked back, really. I mean, that was me hooked on programming.
I was interested in that machine because it's not one that I'm familiar with. I mean, what was the CPU and programming language on it?
It was 6502. It had got a Microsoft Basic, so I started playing around in Basic, doing all the usual things. But we wanted to do a Dungeons and Dragons game, and I thought, well, I'm going to have to generate some mazes. So I started writing code to generate mazes, and writing it all in Basic, it really sucked. But the manual for the Superboard 2, on the back cover, it had got a grid of the 6502 instruction set, instructions, down the left-hand side and addressing mode across the top. And it got an example of a kind of 6-line program that you type in hex that gets a key from the keyboard and puts it on the display. I thought, well, this stuff looks like fun. And using that information and, the mind of a 16, 17-year-old geek, I taught myself to program 6502 in hex, not assembler in hex.
Oh, wow.
And it can generate mazes quickly. So, that was me realizing that you could do things in Basic, but you could do it it'd run about 1,000 times faster if you did it in assembly language. So that's how I got into all of that, really.
Was this very much a kind of solo thing, or did you have anybody you were bouncing ideas off?
No, it was me in the bedroom pounding away on a keyboard for hours. I mean, I got a few friends who were vaguely interested in it, but they were not interested in it to the level of typing in 6502 machine code in hex, let's say.
Well, I know you went to Leeds University, didn't you? So what did you study at uni?
I did computer science.
Right.
In retrospect, it probably wasn't the right degree for me. It all got a little bit hairy-fairy and high level, and I did all of the low-level courses and programming and hardware as much as I could. The comp sci course at York might have suited me better, but I didn't get the grades. But it all worked out in the end. But yeah, I did the degree in computer science, and that's where I met Graham and Andy, and they were similar in that they were doing some assembly language programming as well, and far more interested in the kind of nitty gritty of the machine. So yeah, we kind of hit it off and built on that.
Well, yeah, this was 1984 then. So Andy and Graham that you mentioned then, who you were at university with, you founded your company, Real Time Game Software. So how did you guys kind of come together then, and what inspired starting your own company? What memories have you got about, those early days of setting the company up?
Well, it wasn't a company to start with. It was a partnership. And before that, it was just a rabble of a few people writing a game. It's hard to remember. We definitely wanted to write something that was commercial. We'd started a few joint projects together with not too much of a commercial bent, just, let's make this go. Let's do a threaded interpretive language. Let's do that. But we went, the Sinclair Spectrum looks like it's going to sell in massive numbers, and we'd like to do a game on that. And I was massively into Battlezone in the arcades. I could play all evening on 50p, depending on how the thing was set up. So we thought, well, let's see if we can do a 3D game on the Sinclair Spectrum and, think about bringing it to market. And what we had to develop on was a Sinclair Spectrum and a cassette recorder and an assembler where you typed in the assembly language into REM statements in BASIC and then assembled it into the, patching the binary into a one big binary. So we didn't really have anything that, the average kid in their bedroom didn't have. We didn't have massive budgets, and we didn't have amazing development tools. We just had a Spectrum and a cassette recorder and cussed determination, I think.
Were there any companies or games that really kind of stood out to you and that, helped influence you?
I think the arrogance of youth was such that we were a bit contemptuous of spritey games. It's like we didn't think spritey games were the future, and ultimately we were probably right, but many, many decades early. So we wanted to do 3D games throughout. And the inspiration wasn't really on the home computers at the time. It was in the arcades. So we were influenced by, the big Atari arcade games of the time. Hence us taking a degree of influence from Battlezone and, Star Wars in the arcades. But we weren't really interacting with a lot of the other games industry. We were a bunch of scruffy students doing our own thing.
Well, were you surprised by the success of it? And also, what was your kind of distribution like? How did you get it out there?
Everything in the early days and almost throughout was a bit chaotic and made up as we went along. We did the game. When the game was... development was really slow because of the development system. And, it comes summer break time and we're all off in our own place doing our own thing, so it slows down. But we did get the game more or less complete. Andy Onions, his father, owned a lot of property in Ludlow, and this company called Newsfield rented some offices off him. So he said, there's some people actually doing a computer game magazine, and I know them and we can go and see them. So we showed them Tank Duel, and they went, oh, yeah, give us a copy to review. Well, it's like, it's not finished yet. It's like, doesn't matter, we'll review it as it is. So I think we might have finished it by the time the review came out, which wasn't the case later with Star Strike. We kept checking the review in the magazine to see what we ought to be doing. And it was like, right, we need to duplicate some cassettes. And we found somebody doing cassette duplication. And we got labels printed by Pronto Print in the Leeds City Centre. We employed students as slave labour, putting the stickers on the cassettes and folding the inlays and putting them in boxes in exchange for pizza. And we had Security Corps turning up at our student hall of residence to take boxes of cassettes off to distributors.
Oh, you're literally doing it at the halls of residence?
We were doing it out of Lupton Halls of Residence in Headingley. It was that. I mean, I'm going to use the amateurish because it was. We were not some great big slick computer games company. We were a bunch of students who'd written a game using one Spectrum and one cassette recorder, and we were shipping out the physical product.
Were you sending them to shops then, or was it like mail order? How were you kind of doing it?
We did mail order. We had little, with our adverts in magazines, it was a little clip off the corner of this coupon and send your postal order. We didn't do that much of that, but it was all pure profit. Most of it was to distributors, and we didn't have a big list of distributors. We were kind of working out who was supplying who. And it was mostly the small computer shops. I don't think the big chains had really woken up to it. And when they did, we weren't actually that good at getting into the big chains. We weren't approaching them 6 months before Christmas and taking them out for lunch and all this kind of thing. So we could have done much bigger numbers than we did, but we didn't know that at the time, really. We didn't have many links into the industry. We didn't have agents. We didn't have publishers, all this kind of thing. We were just duplicating the cassettes and shipping them out to whoever wanted them.
Well, other than the students funded on pizza, was it just still the three of you? And did you kind of expand at any point?
It was the three of us for a right long time. And we did start employing people. And I'm glad I started employing other people fairly early on in my career, because I learned a lot about how not to do it. And you kind of expect people to be as motivated as you are and as bright as you are and as hardworking as you are and all of these kind of things. And, you treat them just the same way you treat your other mates. And that doesn't really work. So we couldn't have just stayed as the three of us. We definitely needed to start employing people. But what we really needed to do was start employing, good people, getting them to use our game engine, and we'd be managers. But none of us wanted that. We wanted to be hands-on engineers.
Well, real-time games became known for, obviously you had 3D Tank Duel, and we'll get onto 3D Star Strike in just a moment as well. You became known for those, really incredible wireframe graphics. So was that kind of a house style that you decided on, and why did you decide to stick with that kind of 3D?
We saw first-person 3D as being where it was, and, we accepted there were other kind of games you could do, but it always felt like we did have this arrogance and we did have contempt of people doing this spritey stuff. It probably helped that we weren't artists, so we couldn't really have done the spritey stuff because we couldn't draw the pretty pictures. So, we wanted to be first-person 3D, and it was really weird doing first-person 3D games at the time because I remember being there with, it must have been when we first started working with, that can't be Rainbird, but somebody who's a marketing expert came up and looked at the screen where we got some first-person 3D going and said, "Where am I on the screen?" Went,
Right.
"You're not on the screen. You are looking out into the world." And he went, "Oh, you don't understand the games industry. People will never go for that. They need a character they can identify with." And I was like, What planet are you from? It's like, it's when you look out into the world, you don't see yourself. But, I don't know. It was difficult. So, yeah, it was a house style because we wanted to do first-person 3D, and I don't think we really knew how to do anything else, to be honest. But it helped that an awful lot of the other people doing spritey games didn't know how to do the 3D.
Well, you soon followed it up with 3D Star Strike 1 and 2, and that game had shaded polygon 3D. What was the challenge in creating that?
You mean Star Strike 2 was polygon 3D? I mean, the real challenge, as ever, was you doing it on a very, very slow processor. And, how do you get a polygon filler fast? And for very, very technical audiences, I can't bore about some of the really, really clever tricks we used. Some of them so obscure. You tell people about them now and they go, What? You used a stack pointer as a constant? Are you mad? But we just knew the Z80 instruction set so well and the problem we were trying to solve so well. I remember one time lying in the bath and coming up with a completely new register allocation for the inner loop of the polygon filler and adding up in my head how many T-states it was and jiggling it around. And I could do that just lying there with my eyes closed, writing the code in my head. That's partly how we did it, was we were prepared to put in the hard work, and we must have rewritten parts of that polygon filler, 8 or 10 times. Every time we thought of a clever trick, we had to completely rewrite it. It certainly caused a stir. People were like, "What? You're doing polygons on a Sinclair Spectrum? Are you mad?" They were slow. We had to use them sparingly. An awful lot of the design of Star Strike 2 was based around using polygons, but getting away with as few as we could. Was it as good a game as some of the earlier ones? I never thought so. Other people have said they actually really enjoyed most of the sections. I think we were starting to learn that doing something original is a right lot harder than doing a derivative, let's say, as we did with Tank Duel and Star Strike. We had gameplay to copy. We had ideas that we could just say, well, we just need to make this work. Having to invent it as you go along and try and come up with something that works as a game is very difficult.
And I guess people always want to play the games that they played in the arcade at home, even if it's a different title. I guess that probably helped.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
I think we ended up selling about as many Star Strike 2 as we did Star Strike, but we should have been doing bigger numbers. And I think that's when we started, when Rainbird approached us, that's when we went, well, actually, maybe we are a little bit out of our depth on the distribution side of things, and maybe we benefit from being able to focus on the actual coding rather than all the other bits of what's involved in the games industry.
Well, let's talk a bit more about that, because obviously, Rainbird, massive back in the day, sort of Firebird Games and part of British Telecom from memory. I remember Rainbird were.
Yeah.
How did your relationship with them start then, and how much did it help you, them approaching you at that time?
In retrospect, it helped us a lot. It was a good relationship we had with them. They were looking for some people to port Starglider to 8-bit, and I think we were the obvious choices. And we were still working on the Amstrad version of Star Strike 2, and they said, well, we'll publish that for you. And they did we did a contract for that, and that meant we could just concentrate on some other stuff. And we did the contract for Starglider. We did huge numbers of Z80 versions. We went to see Jez San, who at the time was also programming in his bedroom. It was just Jez with one Atari ST in his bedroom. That was the way the industry was at the time. So we
famous for Star Fox, of course, and Argonaut.
Jez did very well and did all kinds of things going on from there. Yeah, it was. I think because of his family background, I think he had a business focus far earlier than we did, and he had a good agent. But at the end of the day, you need to plough your own furrow, really. And we were quite happy being at the time. Things changed a lot for me, but we were happy at the time being hands-on engineers, doing stupid hours, doing fairly heroic deeds of coding.
Well, what was Starglider like to work on then?
Starglider, there's a couple of projects in my career that have just where you think the code is almost writing itself and the whole thing comes together really quickly. And Starglider was the first one of those. We might come to the other one later on. That was a Genesis project I did. And we looked at the game. We got some details from Jez. We started working on our game engine, and we'd stopped working on... In fact, it was Rainbird introduced us to the guys doing the PDS development system, which really accelerated our development. So we pulled all of our code over into that and started working and got everything whizzing around nicely. And I think we actually finished some of the Z80 versions before Jez had really finished the ST version. We put things in that were in the spec, and Rainbird said, "Oh, you'll have to take that out. Jez hasn't managed to get it done yet."
Right. I'm interested about hearing about, developing for different systems, simultaneously, because I know you're doing that for the Spectrum and the Amstrad, right?
Yeah.
So how did that kind of work? What systems were you using? Were you doing it directly on those machines, or what kind of setup did you have?
By then, we were working on MS-DOS machines, not PCs, but Apricot MS-DOS machines, and squirting the code down a parallel link into the machine. And for PDS, there was links for Spectrum and Amstrad, but the hardware was really easy. So, I built some similar hardware to let me work on the PCW8256, and we just build our own hardware and write the code for the far end, and away you went, really. One Z80 machine was pretty much like any other. I think Starglider on the PCW8256 is actually worth a look, because it had got a really high, it was black and white, but a really high resolution, so we could depth queue it. And it had a thing called roller RAM, where you got an index to the start of each line, so we could do kind of weird whizzy things with screens spinning around and things. But I think I did that port from first getting the machine to delivering the code to Rainbird in about 4 weeks.
And did having that development system make it more reliable as well? Because I guess you weren't, typing on the Spectrum's rubber keyboard, and worried the RAM pack was going to wobble and all that stuff.
touch typing on a turd. After Tank Duel, things like microdrives have come along, which were a mixed blessing because they're so unreliable. Yes. But also the Sinclair network, so we could squirt the code down to another Spectrum and run the game on there, and if it crashed, we weren't having to reload everything off cassette for hours. So things were slowly getting better, but PDS and been able to work on a decent machine with a decent keyboard and save things onto a hard disk, albeit I think the first hard disk we had was 5 megabytes, and yes, that is megabytes. But when you're used to cassette, that's vast. So Starglider was one of those things that went really, really well. I forget how many different versions of it we did. Did Spectrum and Spectrum 128 and Amstrad and PCW, and there must have been some other ones. And we were slightly on the lion's share of the royalties. I think we got 5% versus Jez's 3%. But then Rainbird said to us, "We really want to work with you guys again, and there's no point sharing royalties with anybody else, so why would you want to do another conversion? And these 16-bit machines are coming along, so why don't you do something for one of those, because that's far better for 3D." And we went, okay, let's put some ideas together.
Well, you mentioned about moving over to the 16-bit systems. Before we get onto that, you did have, another big hit on the 8-bits. A game which, coincidentally, we mentioned Chess Sam before, a game called Star Fox.
Yeah.
No relation to the Nintendo game. I know that game's often described as being heavily influenced by Elite. What was kind of the story with Star Fox?
Star Fox was not our design. We were approached by Areola Soft, and they said, "We've got an idea for a game. Can you do it on these platforms?" It wasn't work for hire. We did get royalties. I don't think we ever saw any royalties from memory, and we said, we'll code this game. I don't have particularly fond memories of it.
Right.
I can't remember what I was doing at the time, but I think Graham Baird did quite a lot of the coding on that one. I think the lack of fond memories were, it wasn't really our idea, so we didn't kind of feel any kind of fatherly love for it. And for the last good quarter of the project, we were so frantically short of memory. We were doing huge printouts on the floor and just running up and down the code, working out how we could, tail merge functions and extract some common code and scrabble some bytes back so Graham could do a bit more coding. I do remember we'd submitted that game and one of the games testers came back and said, oh, in this screen here, when you say you want to go from this planet to this planet and it calculates the distance, it's not quite right. I said, yeah, that's because we don't have a square root function. We're doing half of the biggest one of the biggest dimension and half of the other, or some weird bodge. He's like, oh, can you fix that? It's like, okay, well, the memory's completely full. You want me to add a square root? And I think I found 2 characters in the character set, 8x8 character set, 8 bytes per character that were contiguous. So that's 16 bytes to work with. Yay! So I think I got a very, very slow integer Z80 square root into 11 bytes, something ridiculous like that. But, that's how short we were of memory. And that was just, even with a decent development system, that was just really slowing us down. So Star Fox, we did it. We got paid. Areola Soft were happy. But as I say, it was just something we did because we wanted the money. But it did prove to be a little bit harder than we thought. I did an interview maybe a year ago that's where somebody's done a video on YouTube, and the video he's got illustrating it is not our version of Star Fox. It's Nintendo one, and I pointed it out. He says, well, I can't be bothered editing it now. So
a bit of a difference.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, that was Star Fox. I mean, I've done things where people bring up all kinds of other games we did or we published but didn't write, and there was quite a lot of other things along the way. But, I mainly remember the big ones where we were creators and implementers rather than the bits where we were just playing a part.
Nintendo's Star Fox was released as a Star Wing in the UK. Was that because of your game? I wonder what the reason was.
It might have been, but I actually found out later on there was an earlier, I think, Atari console game called Star Fox. So,
right.
There's no new ideas in the world, really.
Fair enough.
We thought at the time it was because we got there first, but I don't know. They obviously did their research and made a decision.
Well, what was it like moving on to the 16-bit systems, and how did you make that move to kind of step up?
It felt pretty glorious, to be honest. It felt like suddenly you weren't working in a tiny little box. You got a much bigger space and a far more powerful processor. But we didn't have a feel for how much more space, how much more power, what we could or couldn't do, how big a game we could get in there. And Rainbow came to us with a design that had come to them from an external games designer. And he wasn't an experienced games designer, and he was a bit of an oddball. And I think Rainbow fell out with him fairly quickly. But he came up with the idea of, a big game to do with submarine warfare on some strange planet with strange alien creatures and volcanoes and things like that. And Graham and I kind of took this idea and bounced it around over numerous drinks, and we were imagining all the kind of things we could do with some of the kind of fantasy role-playing games we can do, and, tying it to a lot of the science fiction books we were reading, doing, maybe somebody's terraforming a planet, maybe there's 2 rival groups terraforming a planet, all of this kind of thing. And we come up with loads of ideas. I don't know if we'd put much down on paper. And then Rainbird said, we've totally fallen out with this guy who was being very, very unreasonable. And we still want to do a game. If you've got any ideas in your heads that are absolutely nothing to do with submarines and alien sea creatures and underwater volcanoes, let's use those ideas. And then we got a fax. This was in the days of fax from Rainbird saying, we've got this idea if you're in an aircraft carrier storming an archipelago of islands. And I've still got that fax somewhere. Can we do a game like that? So Graham and I, started doing some alcohol-assisted brainstorming and sent something back to them. And again, I've still got that saying, well, we've expanded the idea and we'd like to do it, with a little bit more of a science fiction theme. And we'd like it to be two opposing forces of similar abilities. So it really is down to how you play it tactically and strategically. And we started playing around with those ideas. So we were playing around with the ideas and starting to code up all the graphics primitives and the mathematics and everything we needed at the same time. Started putting the game together. And I think we started off doing it as a kind of a big toy box. You've got all these things you can do, all these different weapons. And we were like, well, later on we'll figure out, what the player is supposed to do with all of these things and put a little bit more shape to it. And in the end, we didn't. We just said, let's leave it to them to work out what gameplay works, which of these assets we've given them actually do work in practice and which of them are maybe not that useful. And that's how it came about, really, is just coding the whole thing up in line with our rather wild ideas. And I mentioned earlier a couple of games I've done that kind of came together quite quickly and quite joyfully. Carry Commanded ended up being a real route march. It was serious agony towards the end. Rainbird were very good with us, but they were putting a lot of pressure on us because they had to. We couldn't work any more hours and we couldn't work any faster, and we were very aware of the amount of territory we still had to cover, and it was pretty painful at times, but when it finally came together and you can sit back and go, right, this is what we've actually created, you're like, well, actually, it's okay. It kind of worked out.
As Carrier Command, it was reviewed really well. I'm looking at the scores now. The Games Machine awarded the Atari ST and Amiga versions 98 and 97%.
Yeah.
Ranked the number one game of 1988. Amiga Power Magazine ranked it the 15th best game of all time. So, it was received very well. But in terms of, the strain it put on the company and, you personally, I imagine burning the candle at both ends there as well. Were you getting much help from Rainbird then, and were they influencing the decisions and development a bit much? How did that relationship kind of works? Obviously, this was pre-internet. Was there lots of phone calls and faxes? How did that kind of relationship with them work?
There were a lot of phone calls and faxes. There was a fair amount towards the end of them camping out in a local hotel with loads of machines set up, testing and testing and testing. They couldn't give us any practical help. We'd carried on using the PDS system, which was really great on 8-bit, but when it was adapted for 16-bit, it was not adapted enough, so it was creaking at the seams. So whenever we made a change, it was taking us 5 minutes to see the outcome of that change, which is too long, really, in my opinion. So we were struggling a little bit there. I just remember the last few months of development as being immensely painful, partly because we were trying to do something fairly ambitious, but also there were some bits we didn't really know that well how to do. And we'd left them till the end, of course. And we were having to do the really, really difficult bits under immense strain.
Yeah, it had quite advanced AI and strategy elements to it as well for its time.
It did. And there've been some remakes, and I don't think any of the remakes have ever fully captured what we were doing there. Graham and I were into, the fantasy role-playing games. Rolling the 20-sided dice kind of thing. And all of the kind of supply structure and the links between the islands and the routing of supplies and the tactics of the enemy carrier, they're all done for real. And battles on islands are done for real twice. In that if you're at an island, we unpack all of the structures to do with the resources of the island and put it into 3D, and the battle occurs in 3D. And if you then leave the island, we take all of those 3D assets and we pack it down to everything needed to carry on doing it in a kind of stochastic rolling the dice way. And there was a lot of effort involved in that. And the enemy carrier was making decisions on where to go to beef up its supply lines, to defend an island and all of this kind of thing. So there was an immense amount of work in the background. Whether it actually showed to the player, I don't know. But the enemy carrier and the player are on an equal footing. Everything done in the background is done with the same dice rolling, and anything done when you're at an island, you're battling that island in 3D on equal terms. So we did try and make it as fair as we could. we had to slightly change what weapons the enemy carrier had when you're doing the 3D battles, just because we were short of time, to be honest. But yeah, there was an awful lot we did that maybe it was making a rod for our own backs, I don't know, but we did everything for real rather than a vast amount of cheats.
Well, obviously today it's still, a very loved game. Kind of looking back, obviously it was painful at the time developing it, but in hindsight, I mean, you must feel immensely proud of the work that you managed to pull off.
I think it was one of the ones we did that it wasn't derivative, but it created lots of derivatives. I think an awful lot of games companies looked at it and went, well, okay, well, that changes things. You can do real-time strategy games, and an awful lot of people have credited games that either looked vaguely inspired by Carrier Command or just generally took a lot of ideas to Carrier Command. People have been very generous at acknowledging it. But yeah, it's one of the games I look back with the most fondness, even though it nearly killed me. It was not perfect. The ST and Amiga versions lacked the time warp function because we didn't realize it was important. And we actually did a lot of the coding of it, but Rainbird said we've already printed the manual, so how can we have a button in there that's not in the manual? But we should have had that time warp button for when you move in between islands. PC version, we had time to work on all of the strategy and really improve the AI and et cetera, and add a lot of new features. But with it being a PC in the very early days, the sound sucked. So I actually worked a year or so back with a guy who did the entire rights buyout of Carrier Command with one of his guys to put some more modern sound. Okay, by more modern, I mean 90s sound.
Not the PC speaker, yeah.
Not the PC speaker, no. To actually do one of the very early sound card support in there and fixed a few codes in a code base I hadn't touched for 35 years, which was great fun.
It's interesting as well you mentioned about, doing the ports there. That didn't even cross my mind. That game came out on 7 different platforms, even the Mac. Were you guys doing all the ports in-house then?
The only one we didn't do was Commodore 64. Yes, right. We did them all. I think I did the Mac version single-handed, including modifying a Mac to have the development interface, piggybacking chips inside it. We did them all. The Z80 versions were done by Andy Onions, and what a heroic effort that was. I didn't think he could do it, but he got stuck in and he did the Spectrum 128 version. Yeah, we did loads of versions. I've still got the contract for Carrier Command, and we said we'd do it in 6 months on 8 platforms, and I can't remember whether I signed it on the day after or the day before my 24th birthday. But yeah, that's how young we were, and we'd already got an awful lot of released games under our belts by then.
Well, after Real Time, you founded a company called Cross Products. What kind of led you there?
Well, there was actually massive overlap. I mentioned before we were struggling with PDS on the 16-bitters. So were Vector Graphics, who were fairly close to us in Leeds and ended up being in the same building. And I think it was Andy Craven said, are we going to be in the same situation in a year's time? Or are we going to take control of our own destiny? So I said, yeah, let's do our own development system from scratch. And we used some subcontractors and we threw some money in a hat, and we started off Cross Products in 88, 89, basically saying, let's take a completely different approach to all of this and do it on a PC and use a far better way of doing links to the computer using SCSI links, it was, which is what I actually added to a Macintosh. I added a SCSI interface. So there was a massive overlap between Cross Products and Real Time. But Real Time, we were kind of tailing it off a little bit, and Cross Products was taking more and more of my time. I think the one project I remember where they kind of came together must have been in 91. We had got a contract with Sega of America to port a couple of Electronic Arts PC games to the Genesis /Mega Drive. And the games were Abrams Battle Tank, which we completed, and what was the San Francisco Racer one? Race around San Francisco, something like that. Streets of San Francisco, I think it was called, which we didn't do because we just couldn't get enough speed out of the machine for racing around skyscrapers. So we got the contract. We got some information from Sega. I very quickly extracted the 68,000 CPU from a Genesis and added a piece of homemade hardware of my own. You'll find pictures of it on the web. That added some big stacks of RAM, and I mean literally stacks of RAM soldered on top of each other, in place of a mask ROM and a SCSI chip, and wrote the code and got that working with our own development system and started working on the game. You know, a few things were happening at once. I was doing that Abrams Battle Tank game and forging closer links with Sega of America. We were taking my hand-built prototype piece of hardware and making it into a commercial product. And I was getting close to the end of Abrams, and this is a second project where you felt it's almost writing itself. Yeah, I did it single-handed. It came together really quickly. I mean, it was a port of a PC 3D game to the Genesis, so it was never going to be, you know, the next Shinobi or the next Sonic the Hedgehog. But it did very well and quite early on for Sega of America. And in a book that's been published about Sega of America, they Ken Balthaser there credited it was being the Genesis game that convinced that Sega of Japan, well, actually, maybe these guys do know what they're doing. Maybe there are some decent coders out in the West. So, yeah, that came together well. But I went out to San Francisco for 10 days, 10 to 3 weeks to finish the game. Took my, hand-built load of junk with me and sat in the inevitable cubicle there and started coding away, working on the bug list and adding new features and what have you. And people come by and go, I shot this tank here with this weapon and something disappeared. There was no explosion. I was like, oh, okay, well, let me have a look. And I went, well, the reason for that is because I'm a Muppet, and the piece of code for what happens when that hits that registers it's died but doesn't do an explosion. So I'll code it all up. I'll just take that one there, put that in there, And I said, right, if you stay there and grab the joystick, I've taken you to that level with invincibility, play it again and check it works. And the guy was like, what did you just do? And I was like, cody, press button, code now running on console, you test. He was like, that quickly? He was like, yeah. And he went, okay, I'm going to go and get Bob. So he goes off and gets Bob. So everybody ended up coming by my cubicle to chat with the strange English guy and see how the hell it was I was coding so quickly for it.
What a great advert for your product, though.
It really was. So over the next few months, Sega became my biggest customer for Genesis development systems. We had a close working relationship, which got even closer under really strange circumstances. You've been running your own small companies as a scruffy engineer in, Leeds in the grim north for a decade. And something strange happens, which is Electronic Arts get in touch and said, can you come and see us down in somewhere grim like Slough? I can't remember, because we want to talk about strategic relationship. So we popped down to see them and they went, actually, the strategic relationship is we want to buy your company. We're like, okay, fair enough. Let's talk about it. Oh, we can't. You need to go out to America and talk to them. So, well, actually, we are there next week. So, yeah, we'll pop in and see them. We'll see if anything happens. So we're out in California the next week, and we popped in to see EA. And I got in touch with a few of the people in the Bay Area, customers, etc. And I spoke to Joe Miller at Sega. I said, hi, Joe, we're in the area. Should we pop in? He said, oh, definitely, because we're wanting to talk about a strategic relationship. I thought, oh, okay. So we went to see EA in the morning, and EA kind of went, oh, yeah, we wanted to buy your company, but you need to do all the business plan and cash flow analysis to show that it's going to be a good idea. And I kind of thought, I'm not sure it works that way. It's like, Why do we need to do that? Well, we want to buy your company, but senior management aren't convinced. And the easiest way is if you just do a good presentation to show it's a good app. We were like, okay. So we said, we'll go for lunch. We might be back. We didn't go back. And we went to see Joe Miller at Sega in the afternoon. He said, actually, this strategic relationship is we want to buy your company. And here's the sum we had in mind. We're like, well, that's more how it's supposed to be done.
Some professionalism, finally.
Yeah, some professionalism. So, in 94, Sega bought cross products from us. Real Time was pretty much shut down by then. Abrams was the last game I personally worked on because I was far more into cross products, which was ramping up very quickly. And then I went from being the aforementioned scruffy engineering lead who'd always run his own company to reporting into Sega of America. And they had bought us to do the development tools for, we'd already done Mega CD on top of Genesis and things like that. They wanted us to do 32X and Saturn.
Right.
And they'd made a start themselves, and some parts had gone well and some parts had gone not so well. And they really needed us to fix all of the not-so-well parts, which we did. And the tools kind of worked, but not as much as if we'd had a blank canvas. But, I got on well with all of the Sega of America people. I engaged fully and was out there once or twice a month and was there all the way through the 32X and the Saturn times.
Were those difficult times at Sega? Because I know those two products were, even though they were innovative, obviously they didn't quite have the success in the West that I imagine they hoped for.
Yeah, there is a book, I think it's called Gaming at the Next Level, about the whole history of Sega America and all of the struggles and disagreements and nobody quite knowing the right thing to do, but everybody wanting to do the right thing. It all comes out in the book. There were difficult times. Competition was hot, and in retrospect, you go, well, it's obvious they were going to be the major competition, and it wasn't obvious at the time. And should Sega have done this? Should they have done that? Should they have gone straight for Dreamcast? This kind of thing. Well, maybe. I don't have fond memories of 32X and Saturn. We got development systems working for them, but there were a big muddle of a machine with lots and lots of processors and buses, and they were just a bit of a mess. And Saturn was never designed to do 3D, and it could be persuaded to do it, but not easily and not efficiently and not the way everybody else was doing Polygon 3D.
It was made for those 2D arcade games already,
It was 2D, 2.5D. So, you could do games like, Sega Rally Championship, but you had to be really, really good. And an awful lot of companies did not have engineers who were good enough to do that kind of thing. So with Dreamcast, it was a different approach. There was, again, an awful lot of disagreement in the early days. And, what was interesting was there'd been earlier machines suggested based around SH3E, which is an SH3 with a floating point unit. And we actually started work on a machine there. But then, the SH4 was mooted and Hitachi was still in the design stage. And the American side wanted to put together a machine based on SH4 and the 3DFX chipset. And the Japanese side were far more in bed with NEC, who had a relationship with Power VR, Imagination Technologies as they became. And both sides were courting us to do the development system, which seems strange because we were part of Sega. So you'd have thought, well, we're part of Sega, so obviously we're going to do it. Well, it wasn't that way. The Japanese side had taken quite a while to convince that actually our way of doing things was the right way to do things. So we were working with both sides. So, we were getting prototypes of things based on 3DFX from one side, and later on, actually much later on, prototypes based on NEC from the other side. And, I wish I had that prototype with the 3DFX chipset in it. I went to find it to say, I'm going to put this in my loft and sell it on eBay in 30 years, and it disappeared from wherever it was. So somebody else had away with that one. But
I was going to say that'd be interesting to see because it's kind of a proto Dreamcast.
It would, but to say it was a bunch of hardware just to shake out the silicon, the SH4 at the time, the floating point registers were write only, in that you could write to them, but there was no read path, which isn't that useful. So it was early days for the chips. But it became inevitable the Japanese side were going to win. In 97, the ownership of Cross Products moved to Sega of Japan. So rather than me being scruffy engineer reporting into an American company, I was reporting into the Japanese side. So rather than going to America once or twice a month, I started going to Tokyo once or twice a month. We started working like Billy-O on the Dreamcast development system. So we were in all of the early meetings where we were feature stuffing the SH4 to add everything we needed to do the job. So we added 20% to the SH4 die size in kind of Sega private features, and going through the whole fairly painful Dreamcast development process, really. The development system wasn't painful, but just, everything had to be done so quickly on Dreamcast, and everybody working on the silicon was having problems, and the GD drive was a problem. But we ended up doing all of the development hardware, development software, the emulator for the GD drive, the Set 5 development system, loads of the hardware boards for that. We did the code for putting together the GD drive data structure so people could drop files in and move things around. And then we did the code for burning that onto the writable disks and a mass disk duplicator. Sega were throwing project after project at me, particularly if it involved a mixture of hardware, software, documentation, mad engineers, bit of software on the PC, all that kind of thing. So we had an awful lot going on in the Dreamcast development process.
Did it feel like a lot was riding on Dreamcast? Because obviously that was, their exit from the console market after that didn't compete quite as well as they hoped with the PlayStation 2, I imagine. Did it feel like they were kind of banking the farm on it a bit?
It was, as you say, banking the farm. That was the only game in town. It had to work. It probably deserved to work. In many ways, it was ahead of its time. But I think relationships with some of the big software houses have been soured a little bit. So Sega was very dependent on Sega and not many other people for the launch games. So Dreamcast did okay. I've still got fond memories of the Dreamcast, but ultimately I think we have to accept it was a failure. For me personally, and for Cross Products, it was a good time. When the ownership of Cross Products moved to Sega, I was reporting to somebody who got a tiny office about 3 levels down in the building. Because again, it was like, to some of the higher levels, we were a bit of an unknown quantity. We were these strange Westerners who'd done this development system, and we're not one of their big partners like Zax doing emulators. And I just kept doing what was asked of me and delivering the goods. And the next thing you know, somebody says, "Oh, you don't report to me anymore. You report to my boss's boss." And shortly afterwards, I was reporting to Shoichi Irimajiri, who had been brought in to manage Sega, who was president of Honda of America, a very highly connected guy. So I was reporting directly to Irimajiri-san. And by the time we shut down Dreamcast, on the day we announced it to the press, I was by then reporting directly to Hideki Sato, and I was having a private lunch with him in his office on the top floor on the day we announced it all. So,
what memories have you got of that? Because that must have been a tough time.
It was a tough time, and I do wish I hadn't commuted back from the office wearing my Sega Dreamcast jacket with Sega written across the back.
Oh, wow. But that attracted some attention.
It did. I kept having people going, hang on, let me get my microphone out of my backpack. It's like, no, I'm not allowed to tell you anything. I'm just a scruffy engineer from Leeds who's in this stolen jacket. Go away.
You should have put a Sony jacket on.
Yeah, some kind of cover. So, yeah, I was with Dreamcast throughout. It was obvious after Dreamcast died that Sega had no more use for Cross Products, and they could have shut us down, or they could have said, break it up, get however much money you can. And they actually said, what we want is the best for you and your team, because you've done everything we asked of you. We can't give you an infinite amount of time, but take the time you need to find a buyer for the company, try and maximize the amount Sega will get, but try and keep your team together. If it has to be broken up, do it. So they really worked well with me to find a new home. it ended up being with Imagination Technologies, who did the Power VR 3D chip in the Dreamcast, and they had actually worked with me quite a bit. So as soon as they found out that we were up for sale by October 2001, a month after, the whole Twin Towers thing, we put the deal together. So 2001 until 2018, I was with Imagination Technologies.
That's an incredible ride. What a journey in the industry. Yeah.
It really is. I mean, I read this book on the history of Sega of America, and I was like, I think I'm first mentioned in a chapter in page 40 some, and I remember the whole way through. It was quite a ride. And nothing planned. It was just, you're like, well, that worked or that didn't work. What now? And
that's amazing.
But, it's like people say to me, oh, what's it like being a games designer? I was like, well, my whole games career is kind of bracketed by two Tank games. There's Tank Duel in 94 and there's Abrams Battle Tank in 91. And, that's like a 7-year span. So even being generous that I managed a few games after Abrams Battle Tank, you can say maybe I had a 10-year career, and you might count some of the time I spent doing hardware and software development by Sega, albeit not on the game side as part of it. But, I then spent 17 years with Imagination Technologies, basically working for a chip design company. And all the time, I'm growing the team. I think the time when we were acquired by Sega in 94, I think it was maybe 15, 16 people, built that team up to 30, 40 people. And, took a smaller team into Imagination, but then they started growing a bigger team around me. So I ended up with a team of 60 or 70 people on 4 continents. And I do not know how many countries, but when I had to do my annual peer review spreadsheet, it was in 11 currencies. So you can imagine how much fun that was. We talked about, did I want to be an engineer or a manager? I started off being an engineer and got lured into doing, pretty much full-time management, struggling to be hands-on at work.
You can't avoid those spreadsheets sometimes, can you?
I really couldn't avoid those spreadsheets. Spreadsheets, PowerPoints, giving big presentations to hundreds of people. That's where I ended up.
What are you doing these days, then, Ian? Are you,
What am I doing these days? Well, Imagination hit hard times after Apple decided to kind of drop the technology, and Imagination ended up being broken up. And my side of things, because we'd bought MIPS, went to an American venture capitalist who fairly early on decided to close us down. So 2017, I was made redundant, but I'd always intended to retire on my 54th birthday, and they made me redundant 3 months before that. So that was okay.
It worked out.
That worked out, yeah. So that bought me a Tesla. That was nice.
Beautiful.
And since then, I've been happily retired, but I've been actually getting back down to far more hands engineering, a little bit of coding, but actually quite a bit more electronics.
Back to your first love.
Back to my first love. So, throwing solder around and trying to work out why things don't work. But, I try and keep busy doing my own projects, but I've also been doing a thing called Repair Cafe, where you go along to a community centre and people turn up with broken things, and as quickly as you can, you try and work out why it's broken and get it working again. So, throwing solder around, swapping components, hooking scopes up to things, and generally learning a lot.
Do people bring many Spectrums and Commodore 64s along?
I haven't had either of those. I've had a Genesis. Right. I have, the usual Nintendo Switches, Xboxes. An awful lot of the handheld ones, which were an absolute pain to work on. Dreamcast. I actually had a Dreamcast that wasn't reading its CDs a couple of weeks ago. But you never know what's going to come through the door. It's part of the thrill of it, really. Is just somebody puts something on your desk and you either go, right, I've worked on one of these before, I've got a good idea. Or you go, please can you tell me what this is? Because you don't have a clue.
You might have a few of our Yorkshire-based listeners now thinking, hang on, I've got a Game Gear needs recapping. Where can
Do you know, if I've actually got my wife's Game Gear on my bench next to me that needs recapping.
Right. I heard they're a pain, are they?
No, actually, I've looked through the instructions. That looks like a doddle. It's just I haven't got around to it yet.
Well, Ian, it's been absolutely amazing to hear, your incredible career. Like I said, what a ride that was. So we've crammed a lot into that hour. I really appreciate you coming on and doing some reminiscing with us. It's been incredible to talk to you.
Well, thank you very much. And I'll look forward to hearing the final thing and seeing how coherent I sound, really.